I want to just finish for a few minutes by talking about what it is that really moves me in a way, which is the possibility on the very local and small level to see how these changes play out, to imagine what the future might look like. And it's so good to be able to do it here, because Portland has taken more steps towards what that future might look like than just about any place in this country. My last book was a book called Deep Economy. And what it was about the possibility that we might spend the next 100 years reeling in some of the supply lines that we've spent the last 100 years flinging out. Not only because of the environmental ruination of the course that we're on at the moment, but because of all the other things that it's meant for us to live in a cheap fossil fuel world. You know, cheap fossil fuel did allow us to become very rich. It is destroying the climate, and it's had another effect, too. It's made us the first people in the history of the human species to have no practical need of our neighbors, to have no real need of the people around us. Okay? We've spent the last 50 years defining the American dream as building bigger houses farther apart from each other. That's where we've put our energy and our money and our hopes and our desires, okay? Now, it was environmentally a mistake because they were big and they had to heat and cool and light all those things, and then you had to drive between them. But it also turns out that in every other way, it was a mistake too. Every year since the end of World War II, one of the big national polling firms has asked Americans, are you happy with your life? The number of Americans who say, yes, I'm very happy with my life, peaks in the year 1956 and goes slowly but steadily downhill ever since. A quarter of Americans will make that claim now. Very odd, because in that same 50 years, our material standard of living has almost trebled. We have much bigger houses. We have appliances that no one ever thought of. We can download any vaguely musical sound emitted anywhere on the planet almost instantly, on and on and on. The reason, as far as we can read the data, that this hasn't made us all that much happier, in fact, just the opposite, is because we feel an enormous loss of community, an enormous loss of connection to other people. What happens when you build bigger houses farther apart from each other? You don't run into people anywhere near as often. The average American eats meals with friends and family and neighbors like we're doing tonight half as often as they did 50 years ago. The average American has half as many close friends as they did 50 years ago. Those are very large changes for a socially evolved primate to undergo. And it turns out that we just happen to be alive at the point of the curve where more stuff didn't compensate for that loss of connection and of community, which is why it is so good to see the beginnings of the rebound. Farmers markets, the fastest growing part of the food economy in this country. No place that's done better than Portland with them. Why are farmers markets important? Well, the food uses less energy. It's true. It's a much more environmentally sound proposition. Not only that, the food tastes better, which shouldn't really surprise you. You know, the average bite of food travels 1,500 miles to reach your lips. I traveled 1,500 miles in the last 2 days. I'm feeling kind of limp. Think how the tomato feels, okay? But the real reason that farmers markets are important, I think, is because it's a different social experience. A few years ago, a pair of sociologists followed shoppers First around the supermarket, then around the farmer's market. Y'all have been to the supermarket. You know how it works. You walk in, you fall into a light fluorescent trance. You visit the Stations of the Cross around the supermarket. You emerge with the same basket of, maybe you have the very interesting debit or credit discussion at the end of the experience. That's it. When they followed shoppers around the farmer's market, they had on average 10 times more conversations per visit. Okay? A whole different experience. One that we like. And it's no wonder that we like it. We think of farmers markets as trendy and hip and novel and cool. Farmers markets are just how everybody in the world shopped for food until 50 years ago or 75 years ago, you know, and how 80% of the world still does. You can do the same analysis with energy. We need farmers markets of energy. You know, I have solar panels all over my roof and they feed into the grid, so my neighbor is cooling his beer with the sunlight that falls on my shingles. We need farmers markets in everything that you can think of, you know, in the arts, so that we're not just consuming CDs that come from Hollywood or Nashville, so that we're consuming music made by people we know in our communities and in the company of each other. On and on and on. I'm going to finish just by saying how moving it has been for me to be, as always it is, to be in Portland. This city that more than any other in this country has started getting it right. The city that makes us begin to understand what's possible. The city that in many ways echoes all those European cities, where on average, you know, all the inhabitants of Western Europe, on average, use half as much energy per capita as Americans. Half is a lot. Half gets us a lot closer to doing something about global warming than, you know, ethanol and nuclear and all the other things that we talk about all the time are ever going to get us. And it's because they, and increasingly you here in Portland, have a different sense of the value of the community as opposed to the value of the kind of hyper-individual, alienated self that we've spent the last 50 years in a high-consumer society building. Okay? It is moving. I was up on Council Crest this afternoon, looking out at the great volcanoes, underneath those beautiful Doug firs, you know. And now we're here. I mean, just to have flown in and to see from the air the cherry blossoms, you know, was worth the entire trip. And now to come here and, you know, drink this incredible Pinot Noir from Master Lemelson. All these things are good. All these things are what make life work. And all of these things, every last one of them, is under the most incredible siege. If we are not able to get it right and get it right soon, not just here, but around the world, your duty is not just to make Portland all right. Your duty is to help us in this fight to make the world all right. If we're not able to make it right every place soon, then the Pinot Noir and the glaciers and the cherry blossoms and the Doug firs and the sea level and everything else will be changed beyond anything that we can imagine. We're coming up in a few days on the 40th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. Okay? If we are to have a hope of dealing with the predicament into which we have fallen, then we need a movement as strong, as morally urgent, as willing to sacrifice as the civil rights movement was a generation ago. For those of us in this room, this is our fight. It is the fight on which we will be judged by history and by our own conscience. It is a fight that we may still win. May. No guarantees. I wrote a book called The End of Nature. But there's a window open, and we can still get through it if we work with everything that we've got. It is such a pleasure, such a deep pleasure for me to be in a room full of people who are doing that work, who will make that happen. Thank you very much.